Hi, my name is Helen Hayes and I am 32. What happened at my sister's wedding still echoes through the city. 200 guests. A ballroom like ice beneath the chandeliers. Then my mother's hand hit my face, diamond earring airborne. The reason? I refused to hand over my penthouse keys. An hour later, the doors opened, and power walked in. A CEO who controls 40% of my father's company. What he said next still burns in every whisper about me. But that moment was only the beginning of what followed. I arrived at the Grand View at 8, 3 hours early. White roses, gold trim, a ballroom polished like an altar. I'd wired 50,000 so Sophia's dream wouldn't wobble. Invisible is a role I know too well. Helen, finally, my mother said, scanning me like inventory. That dress is severe. Couldn't you choose something softer? I smoothed navy silk, clean lines, office adjacent, completely mine. Good morning, I said. She kept going like I wasn't there. A proper bride glows, she cooed, motioning toward Sophia's lace. Helen, check the seating, Dad called. Don't reorganize everything. I swallowed the fix and adjusted a tilted centerpiece. Laughter rippled. Aunts whispered. No ring. Uncles sighed. Grandkids. Cousin Derek shrugged. Boardrooms don't hug you. To general approval. So, Helen, Aunt Sally sang, how's your little apartment? It's a penthouse, I said. Even, not a challenge. They laughed. Big city stories, Sophia smiled, perfect and practiced. I kept my proof to myself and breathed steady. Across the room, my parents glowed for guests about Sophia. Our daughter, Dad said, meaning her in the singular. Near the cake, I heard it. Careless voices behind hydrangeas. After the toast, Dad said, we'll announce the penthouse. Will Helen agree? Mom asked, knife wrapped in sugar. She won't make a scene, he answered. Not today. Air thinned. Not generosity. An ambush dressed as tradition. What does she need that space for? No family to fill it. The sentence lodged under my ribs and hummed. I pressed both palms to cool marble and kept breathing. Keys. Flights. Years of dawn deals and bruised carry-ons. Every square foot earned, not borrowed, not begged, not owed. They would turn it into a prop for Sophia's perfection. They would turn me back into the wallet with a pulse. Crystal chimed. I lifted my chin, tucked the hurt where cameras miss, and waited for summons. I should have known then. They weren't done with me yet. I thought the morning would be simple. Smile, sit, clap, leave. Instead, I mapped exits and noted faces that liked spectacle. 10 years built my spine. Silence taught me where to stand. I signed deals under fluorescence, sleeping beside charging stations. The penthouse wasn't luxury, it was oxygen after deep water. Coffee at sunrise. Windows taller than regret. A couch I chose. No one handed me anything. I wrestled it from closing doors. But in my family, trophies don't count unless they match lace. Dad tapped Crystal with a spoon, and 200 heads obeyed. Family means everything, he said, and the room leaned forward. Helen has graciously agreed to gift her city penthouse. I kept smiling the way you smile through dental x-rays. I'm sorry, what? I asked, letting the microphone carry me. Dad's grin wobbled. Mom worried a linen napkin to threads. Your penthouse, sweetheart, for Sophia and Brian's start. This wasn't discussed with me, I said. Level, professional. Whispers rippled. Sympathy chose chairs. Judgment sharpened its knife. Don't be selfish, Mom told the room, deputizing strangers. It's a wedding, someone sang. Don't ruin your sister's moment. Be reasonable, Cousin Derek added, sniffing for spotlight. I remembered scrubbing offices to buy my first interview suit. They weren't asking kindness. They were demanding a rewrite of me. It's just property, Sophia breathed, eyes dewy, voice lullaby soft. If it's just property, why am I the villain for no? Then you buy her one, I said, never raising my volume. Gasps fluttered like trapped birds under the chandeliers. Someone booed, someone filmed, someone mouthed inappropriate. Put your phone away, Mom hissed. This is family time. On table 6, a red dot blinked. Facebook Live, recording everything. My clutch buzzed. MC saw the stream, say when. I inhaled. Quiet had taught me louder language. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks I control. The penthouse is not available, I said again, a verdict. Applause curdled. The band fell silent. Forks hovered midair. I wasn't the wallet with a pulse. I was the owner. They wanted submission. I offered policy. They wanted guilt. Law. You'll regret this, Mom whispered. Sugar boiled off her vowels. Maybe. I'd regret surrender more than any scandal. The crowd wanted a scene. The night wanted a reckoning. I braced for both, uninvited star of their script. What walked in next would reset the room's gravity. Silence fell so hard I could hear the air shiver. Mom's arm stayed raised, my cheek burned, bright and precise. My earrings skittered across marble, a small star in cold light. I didn't touch my face. I counted to 20, slow. I walked, heels clicking, picked up the earring, refastened the clasp. 30 seconds, 30 years. I met my mother's eyes. "Excuse me," I said, steady enough to stack plates. To Sophia. "Congratulations, I hope your marriage brings you joy." I took my clutch and walked straight for the doors. No storming, no tears, just the pace I use in boardrooms. "Helen," Dad called. The doors closed on my name. Elevator. Lobby. Night air cooled the sting to ache. My phone pulsed. "MC," I called. He answered on one ring. "Green light," I said. "Execute the contingency." No questions. "Understood," Marcus replied. "Are you safe?" "Yes." 45 minutes. Bring the shareholder agreement, the one he never read. In the cab, the live stream multiplied like spilled ink. Comments stacked. Did she just slap her? On camera. I flipped the phone face down and breathed until steady. City lights blinked like runways. I chose a scent, not rage. Upstairs, ice on my cheek, I changed into a sweater. Armor unnecessary. The strategy already lived on paper. Notifications swarmed. The clip looped across feeds and chats. Marcus again. Walking in now, lawyers with me. I pictured the ballroom as a storm seen from orbit. He would be the pressure drop the room didn't expect. Brian's brother called, whispering from the coat room. "Your dad looks sick. People are filming everything. Who is Mr. Chen?" "Someone who protects his investments," I said. By my windows, the city was calm. The ballroom wasn't. Marcus texted. Head table, microphone in hand. He would start with facts, not thunder. Facts travel farther. I poured water and watched the skyline breathe. The slap glowed on my skin like a red ledger. Years of preparation for ambushes I never deserved. At the grand view, linen and glass waited for documents. He would say my name, my title, my record, my work. He would place papers and ask my father to read. 2 lawyers would stand by, patient as clocks, final as ink. The live stream would capture every syllable and flinch. I answered one text back, safe, asset fully protected. Then I silenced the phone and let the city exhale. Across town, the doors opened. Gravity began to shift. What he said next would change more than the room. The ballroom had turned into a courtroom before dessert arrived. Marcus's voice carried the weight of quarterly earnings and headlines. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, calm as ice on glass. "Helen Hayes is not some accessory to tonight's drama." Gasps. My father stammered. "That's not possible, she's just—" Marcus laid down papers, contracts sharp as razors under crystal. "She led the Singapore deal. She built Tokyo from scratch. She negotiated Samsung while you thought she was decoration." Silence thickened. The live stream's red light blinked mercilessly. Mom's lips curled, venom sweetened by desperation. "She's lying." "No, Mrs. Hayes," Marcus said evenly. "Your daughter earns more respect in 1 quarter than most executives in a lifetime." Phones captured every syllable. Clients whispered into napkins. Someone muttered, "I saw that article, Financial Times, last fall." My father paled. His kingdom crumbled, grain by grain. Marcus leaned in. "Richard, you signed clause 15.3. If you coerce her, you trigger board intervention. I control 40%. The Jensens hold 50. Do the math before dessert." Papers slid across linen. My father's hands shook. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "Not over family business." "You made it public," Marcus replied. "Now it's corporate liability." Mom's mask fractured. "Ungrateful girl, you've ruined everything." I lifted my chin. I protected what I built, alone. Dad tried pleading. "Helen, tell him to stop, please." Too late. The cameras caught the slap, the greed, the cruelty. "Would you like to press charges for assault?" Marcus asked. The room leaned closer, breathless, waiting for my answer. I didn't flinch. "Not tonight. Consequences are already moving." Whispers turned into verdicts. She was right. That was abuse. Clients texted in real time. Deals dissolving like sugar in rain. Brian's parents stood, stiff-backed, murmuring about canceled contracts. Sophia sobbed. "This was supposed to be my day." "It still is," Marcus said coolly. "A day remembered forever." Mom's perfume stung the air, desperate and choking. "Give her the keys," she demanded, voice cracking glass. "The penthouse is mine," I said. "Earn yours." Flashbulbs stuttered. Laughter broke from the back, sharp, incredulous. The empire my parents clung to was dissolving mid-toast. 48 hours, Marcus decreed, to apologize in public. Or I call the board. Contracts vanish, expansion dies. Papers stayed on the table, heavy as stones. The room smelled like fear disguised as roses. My father looked at me as though I were fire. Not his daughter, not his scapegoat, something untouchable. Mom seethed. Sophia crumpled. Guests scribbled mental headlines. They thought they'd humiliated me. Instead, they had exposed themselves to the world. By morning, the clip was everywhere. Entitled parents demand daughter's penthouse. Wedding explodes. Headlines bloomed like weeds. Contracts shriveled in the sunlight. Dad's phone rang until the battery died. Clients pulling out. Mom ranted online, each word screenshotted with comments. No wonder Helen left. Classic narcissist. She hit her child. Sophia's honeymoon vanished. Brian's parents refused to fund a fantasy. Counseling exposed cracks deeper than champagne toasts. Their marriage dissolved before the ink on photos dried. At Hayes Capital, the board called me in. Senior VP of Global Operations, Marcus announced. The promotion wasn't reward for scandal. It was recognition of steel. You protected assets under fire, he said. That's leadership. My raise went to a women's shelter, a quiet offering to those still silenced at home. The penthouse stayed mine. Locks changed. Guest list rewritten. Mom's number blocked. Dad's messages unread. The city kept spinning, but lighter, freer. For the first time, I wasn't orbiting anyone else's gravity. At night, I stood by those windows, 45th floor, coffee in hand, sunrise slicing the horizon. Not proof of wealth. Proof of boundaries that held. Blood had demanded sacrifice. Respect had demanded none. I chose the latter, and life expanded. Cousins whispered apologies. Strangers sent messages. I see you. Even Brian's quiet text, you deserved better. My family? They became footnotes in a cautionary tale. The family I built, colleagues, friends, mentors, stood taller. No one asked me to shrink. No one took credit. So here's what I know now. Success isn't debt you owe to those who mocked you. Love isn't control disguised as loyalty. And family isn't blood. It's respect, freely given. If you've ever had to choose between approval and peace, you are not alone. Comment boundaries matter if you know that fight. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it's okay. Subscribe for more stories about standing tall when it hurts most. Because in the end, my penthouse wasn't the prize. My peace was. And that, finally, is untouchable.
When the letter first arrived, I thought it was another condolence card. The envelope was heavy cream stock, embossed with the insignia of a downtown law firm. Inside, the words blurred together. But I caught enough to know my world was about to tilt again. The reading of Aunt Vivian's will, scheduled for Tuesday at 10 in the morning. In the days leading up to it, I walked the halls of her beach house in a daze. The house smelled faintly of sea salt and polished wood, the scent of her life still lingering. I couldn't separate the grief from the weight of responsibility pressing on me. She had been meticulous about everything rules, business, reputation. I knew whatever she left behind wouldn't be small. On the morning of the will reading, I dressed in a navy suit she would have approved of. The courthouse-like precision of downtown offices always unnerved me, but I carried myself the way she taught me chin level, stride steady. Harold Thompson, her lawyer of 3 decades, greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that softened at the edges. He offered condolences again before motioning me toward a chair in his wood-paneled office. I folded my hands in my lap, steadying them against the polished armrest. I was prepared to hear about the estate, the beach house, the company shares, maybe a trust account I hadn't known about. What I wasn't prepared for was the jarring click of the door behind me. I turned, and time cracked open. 2 figures stood framed in the doorway. My father, heavier than memory, gray swallowing what used to be dark hair. My mother, thinner, her eyes shadowed, but her smile forced into something sweet. 16 years of silence collapsed into that moment. "Selena," my mother said, voice soft as though she had just tucked me in last night. "Look at you all grown up." I couldn't move. The air thinned until every breath scraped my lungs raw. My father's hand rose in a half wave. "We're your guardians," he said. as if the words were simple truth. Thompson's head lifted from his folder, his expression unreadable. My parents took seats across from me, their smiles tight, rehearsed. The will had not yet been read, but already the room was charged with something far more dangerous than paperwork. My mother leaned across the table before I had time to react. Her arms closed around me, thin but insistent, and I froze in place. The scent of her perfume hit me sharp, floral, oddly familiar, and I felt the years tumble backward in a rush I didn't want. When she pulled away, her hands lingered on my shoulders, her eyes searching my face as though she had the right to study me. "You look so much like Vivian now," she murmured, her smile quivering. My father sat beside her, his hand resting on the table with deliberate ease. "We've been trying to find you," he said, his voice low, carrying a weight I wasn't sure was regret or performance. 16 years is a long time, but we're here now. I wanted to laugh, but the sound caught in my throat. My chest burned with anger, yet underneath it was a dangerous pull, an old hunger for the parents I had once begged to come home. "We're your guardians," my mother repeated, softer this time, as if the words themselves could erase the years. "We only want to help." Across the desk, Thompson cleared his throat. He closed the folder in front of him with careful precision. "Perhaps," he said evenly, "we should set aside these questions of guardianship for later. There are legal documents that must be reviewed before anything further is said." The sudden steel in his tone steadied me more than I expected. My parents glanced at each other, a flicker of unease passing between them before my father gave a stiff nod. Thompson rose. "For now, let us take a brief recess. We'll reconvene once I have the necessary records at hand." The meeting dissolved into murmurs and movement, but I stayed seated, my hands gripping the chair arms. My parents' return was no longer a fantasy. It was a reality thick with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. And yet, against all reason, a part of me still longed to know why they left. I was 12 the morning my world collapsed. The October air had slipped cold through the thin apartment walls, and I woke shivering, waiting for my mother's knock on the door, the call that always pulled me from sleep. It never came. The apartment was too quiet, heavy with an emptiness I couldn't name at first. I padded into the hallway, still in my socks, and saw their bedroom door open wide. My mother never left it open on her bad days. She preferred the darkness. The closet yawned half empty, hangers swaying lightly as though they'd just been disturbed, drawers pulled out, only stray socks and folded receipts left behind. On the kitchen counter lay a single page, her handwriting small and rushed. "Selena, we cannot do this anymore. Vivian will take care of you. We are sorry." 16 words to end a childhood. I read them again and again, hoping I had misunderstood. I dialed my mother's cell phone until the battery gave out. My father's line was already disconnected. I waited at the window all that day, convinced they would reappear, embarrassed, ready to explain. Night fell, and I curled on the couch with dry cereal, straining to hear footsteps that never came. On the second day, the landlord banged on the door, demanding rent. I stammered lies about my parents being away, but his eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing. He muttered something about calling social services. My heart hammered as I bolted the door after him. By the third day, the silence pressed too heavily to bear. I called my school counselor, my voice breaking as I tried to explain. Within hours, a woman from Child Protective Services arrived. Miss Dawson, with her steady voice and kind eyes, told me gently that my parents had left for good. That night, I packed what I could into a single suitcase, waiting for an aunt I barely knew to take me away. And when Vivian arrived, her face unreadable, I understood that my old life was over. The drive to Aunt Vivian's house felt endless, the road unwinding like a thread, pulling me farther from everything I knew. When we arrived, The house loomed against the sky, a grand beach property with windows that seemed to watch me as I stepped out of the car. Vivian didn't hug me or offer words of comfort. She only said, "Pack what you can carry was a wise choice. The rest can be arranged later." Inside. The order was startling. Not a cushion out of place. Not a book askew. I trailed behind her, afraid even my footsteps might scuff the polished floors. That first night, she gave me a list wake at 7, breakfast sharp, beds made before leaving rooms, piano practice an hour daily, homework completed at a desk. Her voice was clipped but calm, and there was no mistaking the expectation that these rules were not suggestions. I tried to test her resolve. I stayed in bed past breakfast, skipped practice, pretended my assignments were finished when they weren't. A part of me wanted her to snap, to threaten to send me away, to prove that adults always left eventually. Instead, she responded with consequences so precise they almost stung more than anger. Late for breakfast, the kitchen was closed, and I would wait until lunch. Homework left undone. Plans canceled until every page was complete. Yet she never raised her voice, never once hinted that I was a burden she didn't want. If anything, her consistency unsettled me more than punishment. When I pushed, she didn't push back, she simply held the line, steady as a wall. There were moments, rare and fleeting, when her stern mask shifted. The night I cried over an old photo of my parents, she sat beside me without a word, handing me a handkerchief until the tears dried. She didn't call it love, and I didn't dare, but something in her presence began to feel immovable, even safe. And so, under her rules and watchful eye, I started to become someone different, though I didn't yet know who. At first, Westfield Academy felt like a punishment disguised as opportunity. The halls were filled with polished shoes and voices trained in confidence. While I stumbled through classes that assumed I had years of preparation, my classmates carried new textbooks, while mine were secondhand. They spoke of ski trips and European summers, while my memories held broken-down cars and my father disappearing for weekend games. I spent nights at my desk, drowning in geometry problems and Latin translations, determined not to let the cracks show. Still, failure stalked me. My first semester grades came back with more red ink than I could bear. I wanted to quit, to scream at Vivian that I didn't belong in her world. She listened quietly as I raged, her face unreadable. When I was finished, she simply said, "Your circumstances are not your choice, but what you do with them is." Her bluntness felt cruel, but it also anchored me. I hired a peer tutor with the allowance she gave, created study groups, and began clawing my way upward. By junior year, my name appeared on the honor roll. By senior year, teachers no longer looked at me as the charity case in Vivian Hughes's shadow. All the while, she continued her relentless lessons in business. On weekends, she took me to meetings, whispering notes. Notice who concedes first. Watch whose eyes shift when numbers are mentioned. I thought she was molding me into something I never asked to be, and the resentment simmered beneath my progress. The worst of our clashes came during college applications. I wanted a state school near friends. She insisted on higher ambition. One night I shouted, "I never asked to be your project." Her eyes cooled, but her voice stayed level. "And I never asked to be your guardian. Yet here we are. I'm trying to give you what your parents never could options." For the first time, she told me about my father's brilliance in math, how he could have gone to college but never did. His bitterness, she said, drove him toward gambling and shortcuts. "I won't let you waste yourself the same way." That revelation cut through my anger. It didn't erase her severity, but it gave it shape. When the acceptance letter from Northwestern arrived, I understood she hadn't been molding me into her image. She had been forcing open a door I hadn't dared to knock on. The diagnosis came in early spring, when the garden outside was just beginning to show color again. Pancreatic cancer. The words sounded clinical, almost ordinary, until the doctor's voice dipped and I understood the truth. There would be no cure, only management, and even that would be brief. Vivian listened without flinching. She nodded, asked questions about treatment schedules, and thanked the doctor as though he'd given her a weather forecast instead of a sentence. I sat frozen in the corner of the room, my chest so tight I couldn't breathe. From that day forward, our roles shifted. I became the one enforcing rules medication at certain hours, meals carefully planned, appointments booked and attended. She submitted without protest, which unsettled me more than her illness. For years, she had demanded precision from me, and now she seemed almost relieved that I was the one demanding it of her. The house grew quieter as her strength waned. Paperwork replaced her sharp presence at meetings, and then even that faded. I watched her, strong and unbending for so long, shrink into fragile outlines beneath blankets. Yet in those months, something else emerged. The edges of her voice softened. The silences between us grew companionable instead of stern. One evening, as I helped her into bed, her hand clutched mine with unexpected force. Her eyes, dimmed but steady, met mine. "You were the daughter I never allowed myself to have," she whispered. "Taking you in was the best decision of my life." I swallowed hard, fighting the tears that blurred her face. I had waited years to hear words like those, and now they came when time was nearly gone. She passed away in her sleep 8 months later. The house, once filled with her footsteps and her rules, echoed with emptiness. I walked through each room, touching the furniture she had chosen, the piano she had insisted I practice, the desk where she had pressed me to work harder. Grief and responsibility arrived together, one heavy with loss, the other demanding I carry what she left behind. I buried her with the certainty that my life would never again be untouched by her shadow. And then came the letter summoning me to hear her will. The room held its breath as Harold Thompson adjusted his glasses and began to read. His voice was measured, steady, every word landing like a stone in water. "To my niece, Selena Whitford, I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to the property at Seaview Beach, all shares in Hughes Home Collections, and liquid assets totaling $2.5 million. I sat frozen, the numbers slipping past me, unreal and heavy at once. My hands trembled against the armrests, not from greed or triumph, but from the crushing reminder that she was truly gone. And this was what remained of her life. Across the table, my parents leaned forward, their smiles faltering. My father cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson, surely there must be provisions for us, as her legal guardians. We have responsibilities in guiding our daughter through such weighty matters." The word daughter stung. My mother nodded quickly, placing her hand over mine as though the last 16 years had never happened. "She's young. It would be overwhelming for anyone. That's why we're here." I pulled my hand back, my pulse sharp in my ears. Part of me wanted to stand and shout, to remind them they had forfeited any right to claim me. But another part, the 12-year-old who once waited by the window, hesitated, searching their faces for something real beneath the practiced smiles. Thompson closed the folder with deliberate care. "We will pause this discussion. Questions of guardianship and management require review of the full documentation, which I will prepare by tomorrow. Until then, no decisions will be made." My parents exchanged a glance. A flicker of irritation quickly smoothed into polite nods. I stayed silent, anger knotting with doubt inside me. They had returned at the exact moment Fortune had, and yet a dangerous part of me wondered if this was my chance to hear the answers I had craved for years. That night, I agreed to meet them for dinner. The restaurant was one Vivian had favored, all polished wood and quiet elegance. I chose it deliberately, hoping the formality might keep emotions in check. My parents were already seated when I arrived. my father standing quickly to pull out my chair, my mother smiling as if this were a reunion years in the making. For the first 20 minutes, conversation wavered between small talk and awkward silences. They asked about my education, my work, my life with Vivian. I answered sparingly, watching them both, trying to reconcile the faces across the table with the ones etched in childhood memory. Finally, my mother's eyes filled with tears. "We owe you the truth," she said, her voice trembling. "When we left, we were broken people. Your father's gambling had consumed everything, and I was drowning in depression. We convinced ourselves you'd be safer with Vivian. She had money, stability, a future we couldn't give you." My father nodded, looking down at his plate. "It was cowardly. I've been clean for 8 years now. Your mother found help, too. We thought of reaching out so many times, but shame kept us silent." The ache in my chest deepened. For a moment, I almost believed them. I wanted to. I wanted the years of silence to have a reason beyond neglect. But then the conversation shifted. My father lifted his glass, his tone softening. "Of course, we're stable now. But it hasn't been easy. The mortgage on our condo, $70,000, still hangs over us. And the medical bills for your mother's treatment." His voice trailed, waiting. My mother reached for my hand, her grip tight. "We're not asking for much. Only a little help to get back on our feet. You have so much now. Selena, it would mean everything." The warmth drained from me, leaving only clarity. Their regrets bled too easily into requests, their apologies tangled with numbers. I pulled my hand back, keeping my voice calm. "I need time to think." I left them at the table, the taste of bitterness sharper than the food I barely touched, and walked into the night knowing Vivian's letter waited for me in Thompson's office. The next afternoon, Thompson's office felt heavier than before. My parents were already there, their lawyer seated beside them, but Thompson ignored the posturing and turned directly to me. From a locked drawer, he withdrew a thick file and a sealed envelope with my name written in Vivian's precise handwriting. "This," he said, sliding it forward, "was left for you to read in circumstances exactly like these." My fingers shook as I broke the seal. Vivian's voice seemed to rise from the page, crisp and steady even in ink. She wrote of the first months after she took me in, how my father had demanded $50,000 not to challenge the guardianship. How years later, my mother claimed she needed money for cancer treatments that never existed. Each attempt had been documented, investigated, disproven. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to keep reading. The letter revealed the truth I had never known at 16. Vivian had legally adopted me. She had chosen not to change my name, hoping I might someday reconcile with my parents. But in the eyes of the law, I had been hers ever since. "Family," she wrote, "is built through consistent care, not DNA. Blood may connect, but it does not entitle." I folded the letter slowly, the weight of it settling deep inside me, the flicker of hope I had carried since childhood that my parents might return for love, not for gain snuffed out cleanly. When I lifted my eyes, my parents were staring at me, their faces pale, their lawyer whispering urgently in their ears. Thompson closed the file with finality. "It seems," he said, "the matter is settled." And in that moment, I knew the final confrontation could no longer be delayed. They came to the beach house at dusk, their rental car crunching over the gravel drive as if they owned the right to arrive unannounced. I opened the door only far enough to block their way, but my mother slipped past me, her eyes roaming greedily over the high ceilings and ocean view. My father followed, his voice already rising. "You can't shut us out, Selena." "We are still your parents," he said, his words sharp with anger rather than love. I stood my ground. "You abandoned me. Vivian raised me. She is my mother." For a moment, silence pressed between us, broken only by the crash of waves outside. Then the threats began, rumors they could spread, stories they could tell, their voices climbing with desperation. I didn't flinch. Thompson had prepared everything, from restraining orders to security cameras. Within minutes, 2 officers appeared at the door, their presence turning my parents' fury into a retreat masked as indignation. As the patrol car carried them away, I felt something inside me settle. The girl who once waited by a window for their return was gone. What remained was the woman Vivian had shaped steady, unshaken, unwilling to be claimed by those who had surrendered me. Months later, the papers were signed establishing the Hughes Foundation for Children Left Behind. With every scholarship granted, every home built, I felt Vivian's presence beside me. She had given me more than wealth. She had given me a map to become whole. I've been standing in the same kitchen since I was 22, though the place looks nothing like it did back then. Calder's Table was once a dim little corner diner on a busy Seattle street. The kind of place you'd walk past without a second glance. My grandfather, Silas Calder, had opened it in 1974, cooking comfort food for dock workers and office clerks, when he passed it down to my parents. They kept the name, but let the shine fade. By the time I returned from culinary school in New Orleans, the walls needed paint. The menu hadn't changed in a decade, and the regulars were getting fewer every year. I'd earned a degree from Oregon State in marketing before chasing my culinary dream, and I walked back through those doors with a plan. Not just to cook, but to build something worth remembering. I brought in bold flavors, soy ginger short ribs that melted under the fork, seared halibut with saffron beurre blanc, and the dish that would become our signature tangerine glazed lobster. I learned to style plates for the camera, posting videos of sizzling poke bowls and caramelizing sugar that turned our dormant Instagram into a feeding frenzy, from 12 followers to 50,000 in 2 years. Our little restaurant became a place people crossed the city to visit. The pinnacle came when the Alderbrook Hospitality Group approached me. They wanted Calder's Table recipes for their West Coast hotels, willing to back it with a $1.8 million investment. I negotiated every detail myself: menu rights, sourcing standards, even the plating. When we signed the deal, I stood in the quiet dining room after closing, hands on the worn wooden bar, imagining my grandfather's smile. People began to call me the face of Calder's Table, though officially I was still just the head chef. I didn't push for the title. The work spoke for itself, and I told myself the family would see that in time. Still, on quiet mornings before the prep rush began, I'd sometimes imagine a place of my own, not to replace Calder's, but to see what I could build without limits. That morning, as I prepped for our annual family meeting, the air in the private dining room felt warm with possibility. I didn't know the future of the restaurant was about to turn in a direction I never saw coming. The private dining room had always felt like a sanctuary, deep wood paneling, shelves of wine bottles, and framed black and white photos of my grandfather in his apron. It was where we celebrated milestones, where decisions were made over plates of food and cups of coffee. That morning, I walked in with my notebook ready, expecting to talk about expansion plans I'd pitched months ago. My father, Kenneth, sat at the head of the table, glasses low on his nose. My mother, Elise, had her usual steady, unreadable expression as she sipped her coffee. Sloane, 3 years younger than me, lounged in her chair, scrolling on her phone like she'd rather be anywhere else. Dad cleared his throat, his signal that something big was coming. "Your mother and I have decided it's time to appoint a CEO for Calder's Table," he began. "We believe Sloane is ready to take the helm." For a moment, the words didn't register. "Sloane," I repeated. She looked up from her phone with a smile that barely reached her eyes. "I've got my MBA. Maris, time to put it to use." Dad went on, "You've done wonders in the kitchen, but Sloane has the business acumen to scale. We're thinking bigger picture, multiple locations, franchise potential." I set my pen down slowly. I doubled our revenue. I secured a $1.8 million investment. I built the brand from the ground up. And you think I can't see the big picture? Sloane leaned forward, flipping through a printout of her strategic vision. First step is streamlining the menu. Cut the niche items too expensive, too slow to produce. Focus on high-volume sellers burgers, fried rice, things we can turn quickly. That's not what we're known for, I said sharply. Those niche dishes are why Alderbrook invested in us. Maris, my mother said softly. This is about growth. No, I said, heat rising in my chest. This is about replacing the person who built this place with someone who's never spent a night on the line. Dad raised a hand. Enough. You'll stay on as head chef under Sloane's direction. It's what's best for the business. The words landed like a slap, and I knew nothing about this meeting was going to be easy to swallow. The first week under Sloane's direction felt like being slowly pushed out of my own kitchen. I'd walk in each morning to find purchase orders altered, premium ingredients slashed in favor of cheaper substitutes. Frozen shrimp replaced the fresh spot prawns we'd been sourcing from the coast for years. Imported saffron gone too costly for the margins. Sloane's note read in red ink across my order sheet. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from Denise Hart, our seafood supplier for nearly a decade. Maris, your sister just called me asking for bulk frozen halibut. Is this some sort of trial run? Her voice was cautious, but I could hear the edge of disbelief. No. Denise, I said, gripping the phone tighter. It's not a trial. Ignore her order. I'll handle it. But handling it meant fighting the same battles every day. Sloane began reviewing my marketing campaigns, questioning why we spent on professional photography or sponsored posts. She didn't understand that a single viral video could fill our tables for weeks. The staff felt the shift, too, mid-service. She'd wander into the kitchen, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes while servers sidestepped her in the narrow space. Once, during a dinner rush, she leaned over the sauté station and told my sous chef to simplify the garnish on our miso cod. The plate went out looking like something from a chain restaurant, and the customer sent it back. By the end of the month, the tension was thick enough to taste. The team spoke in clipped sentences, careful to keep their heads down. They looked to me for answers I didn't have. Then, in a manager's meeting, Sloane flipped open her binder and said casually, I think we should cut the tangerine glazed lobster, the miso cod, and the yuzu scallops. They're too labor-intensive and eat into profits. I stared at her, my pen frozen above my notes. Those weren't just dishes, they were the backbone of our reputation. The reason Alderbrook had written a check with 7 figures on it? I knew then that she wasn't just trimming costs, she was dismantling everything I had built. Piece by piece. The night of the chef's table event was supposed to be a showcase 5 courses, each paired with wines from a boutique vineyard in Oregon. Our most loyal patrons seated around the open kitchen to watch the process. I'd spent weeks designing the menu, refining every plate until it felt like art on porcelain. The tangerine glazed lobster was the centerpiece, the dish that had earned us praise from Alderbrook's investors. Guests had just settled in, the first course being plated, when Sloane appeared at the pass in a tailored blazer and a self-satisfied smile. She tapped her glass with a spoon, drawing every eye in the room. I wanted to share some exciting news about the future of Calder's Table. She began. Starting next month, we'll be streamlining the menu to improve efficiency and profitability. Some of our more elaborate dishes, including tonight's lobster, will be retired to make room for faster, higher volume options. The room went uncomfortably still. My staff glanced at me, wide-eyed, hands hovering over plates. I stepped forward, keeping my voice steady. These dishes are why we're booked solid. They're not just food, they're our identity. Sloane's smile thinned. Our identity needs to be scalable. Before I could answer, my father's voice cut in from the corner, calm but firm. Maris. Adjust. Change is necessary. The words burned more than Sloane's announcement. Adjust, as though my role was to fall in line and watch our reputation unravel. I finished the service in silence, my movements mechanical. The flavors I'd fought for suddenly tasting like someone else's after the last guests left. I didn't go home. Instead, I walked the wet streets to Holly Vance's place, the warm-lit bistro that had been my second home since culinary school. She poured me coffee, set it down, and leaned against the counter. I told her everything Sloane's cuts, the public humiliation, my father's dismissal. Holly listened, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finally stopped, she asked quietly, "If this wasn't your family's place, would you stay?" The answer came without hesitation. "No." She nodded slowly. "Then why are you still there?" I didn't have an answer, but the question followed me into the night, settling deep in my chest as something that could no longer be ignored. All weekend, Holly's question echoed in my head. If this wasn't my family's place, would I stay by Sunday night? I'd stopped trying to argue with the answer. The only thing left was to decide how I was going to leave. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, a stack of worn recipe binders beside me. These weren't just lists of ingredients, they were years of trial, error, and refinement. The tangerine glazed lobster, the miso cod, the yuzu scallops. I backed up every file to an external drive, scanning my handwritten notes into PDFs. The restaurant's official copies could stay where they were, but the originals were mine. Then I went through my supplier contacts. Denise Hart's seafood deliveries, the organic farm in Snohomish that sent us fresh herbs every Thursday, the artisanal vinegar maker in Portland. These weren't just vendors, they were relationships I'd cultivated over late-night calls, shared meals, and mutual trust. I exported every email thread, saved phone numbers, and made sure they knew to expect changes. Last was the Alderbrook file. Every meeting note, every version of the contract, every email with Ethan Dre, their representative. Technically, the contract belonged to Calder's table, but the trust that had made it possible belonged to me. Ethan had come to me because he knew my food, my standards, my follow-through. Without that, the numbers on paper didn't mean a thing. By the time the sun rose Monday, my decision felt solid. I dressed simply black blazer, dark jeans, and walked into the restaurant before the first prep cook arrived. My father's office smelled faintly of old paper and roasted coffee. He looked up from his desk. "Surprised?" "What's this?" he asked as I set a single-page letter in front of him. "My resignation," I said, effective immediately. His brows pulled together. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't just quit. This is your family's business. It stopped being mine when you made Sloane CEO. I said evenly, "I'm not working under someone who doesn't know the first thing about what we do." "You'll regret this," he warned. "You're walking away from your legacy." I met his eyes. My legacy is what I built. I'm taking that with me. I left before he could answer, the envelope still lying unopened on his desk. Outside, the air was sharp and damp, the city waking around me for the first time in years. I wasn't walking toward a kitchen. I was walking away from one. The first few days after I walked out felt like stepping off a moving train. The noise and motion were still there, but I was standing on the platform, watching it all speed past without me. I kept my phone off most of the time, letting messages pile up. I didn't need to hear the panic to know it was coming. By midweek, the stories started trickling in. Ryan, our front-of-house manager, texted that 2 servers had quit after a brutal Friday night where orders were triple-entered and half the tickets went missing. Kristen, one of my best line cooks, emailed to say Sloane had tried to run the kitchen herself for a lunch shift, burned a pan of rice, overcooked the salmon, and sent out plates that came back untouched. The vendors were no better off. Denise Hart called me one morning, her voice half frustrated, half bewildered. "Maris, they're asking for frozen shrimp now. Bulk orders. Is this real? You always insisted on fresh?" "It's real," I said, my stomach turning, but not from me. "Do what you think is right." Yelp reviews started dipping within days. Not the same as it used to be. Signature dishes gone. Fish tasted off. I didn't reply to the reviewers. I wasn't there to fix it anymore, but each line felt like watching a crack spread through something I'd built with my own hands. The calls from my father started on Thursday. I let them go to voicemail. The first was terse. "We need to talk." The second carried more strain. "Suppliers are confused. Call me back. By Friday." His voice was tight, almost pleading. "There's an issue with Alderbrook. Ethan's raising concerns about changes to the menu. This is serious. Maris." That one made me stop. Alderbrook wasn't just a contract, it was the foundation of the restaurant's growth plan. The thing that had shifted us from local gem to regional contender. If Ethan was unhappy, it meant something big was breaking loose. I didn't call back. Not yet. But I felt the pull. The curiosity that comes when you know a storm is about to hit, and you're the one who taught them how to read the weather. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't pick up when I saw Ethan Dre's name flash across my screen, but curiosity won out. "Maris," he said without preamble. "I just met with your sister. It was not good." I leaned back in my chair. How bad she couldn't answer basic questions about the signature dishes. When I asked about sourcing, she gave me numbers that didn't match our agreement. Then she pitched replacing the tangerine glazed lobster with burgers. Burgers. "Maris." His voice was sharp, the frustration barely contained. I closed my eyes, picturing the expression he must have worn in that meeting. Ethan didn't rattle easily. If quality changes, the deal's off. He continued, "I'm giving you the courtesy of a warning before we make anything official. We signed this because of your food, your standards. Without that, Alderbrook has no reason to stay." "I'm not there anymore," I said quietly. "You'll have to take it up with the CEO." There was a pause. "That's a shame," he said, and the line went dead. 3 days later, my father called. His voice was raw, stripped of the usual authority. "Maris, it's gone. Alderbrook pulled the investment. Ethan won't even return Sloane's calls. We're in trouble." I kept my tone even. "I told you what would happen. We need you to fix this," he said, urgency in every word. I stared out the window at the rain streaking down the glass. "Ask your CEO," I said, and ended the call. The silence afterward was almost physical, like the air had thickened. I knew the loss of $1.8 million wouldn't just bruise Calder's table, it would leave a wound they might not recover from. And yet, I felt no urge to step back in. If they wanted to save it, they'd have to decide what my worth really was. They chose a small cafe in Fremont, halfway between my apartment and the restaurant. Neutral ground. Though nothing about it felt neutral when I walked in and saw them, my father with his tie loosened, my mother avoiding my eyes, and Sloane with her arms folded like armor. "Thanks for coming." My father started, "We need to talk about bringing you back. Alderbrook's gone, but we can rebuild if we move quickly." I took my seat, set my coffee down. "If you want me back, here are my terms. Equal partnership with Sloane, not head chef under her direction. Equity now, not someday. And public recognition for the contributions I've made." Sloane scoffed. "You're trying to take my job. I'm asking for what I've earned." I said, "I doubled revenue, secured the investment, built the brand. You lost that investment in one meeting." "That's enough," my father said sharply. "We can discuss the details, but Alderbrook is priority one. You have the relationship with Ethan." I held up a hand. "You don't get my relationships without respecting my role. This isn't me bailing you out just to go back to being sidelined." The conversation spiraled into clipped exchanges, Sloane defending her strategy, my father pushing for a quick fix, my mother murmuring about compromise. But as the words volleyed back and forth, I felt something shift, even if they agreed to my terms. I realized I didn't want to go back. Not to the same walls where every decision felt like a battle, not to a family that only saw my worth when the balance sheet bled. "I think," I said finally, my voice steady, "that what I want isn't to return. It's to start fresh." Sloane's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." My father leaned forward, frowning. Maris, be reasonable. But in that moment, the decision felt like the clearest thing I'd ever made. I wasn't here to negotiate a comeback. I was here to walk away for good. Holly didn't hesitate when I told her I was ready to open my own place. Within a week, we were walking through a vacant corner spot in Capitol Hill, a former bakery with high ceilings, exposed brick, and a worn charm that begged for revival. I could already see the kitchen layout in my mind, smell the first night's service. We signed the lease, pooled our savings, and started tearing the place apart. Days blurred into nights choosing tiles, sanding counters, painting walls ourselves when the budget got tight. Every decision was mine to make, and for the first time in years, no one was hovering over my shoulder with a spreadsheet. I called Ethan once the blueprints were set. If you're still interested, I told him, I have a new menu you'll want to see. He came by with his tasting team, and by the end of the night, he was signing a $500,000 contract to feature my dishes in 2 Alderbrook hotels. It wasn't $1.8 million, but it was mine built on my terms. The news spread quickly. Denise Hart showed up with her first delivery of fresh seafood, grinning like she'd been waiting for the call. Ryan left Calder's to manage my front of house, and Kristen traded her station there for a spot on my line. It felt like getting my family back, the one I'd chosen. Opening night came with a packed dining room. Plates of tangerine-glazed lobster and yuzu scallops left the pass under my name, my vision intact. I moved through the kitchen with a calm I hadn't felt in years, every sizzle and aroma reminding me why I'd started in the first place, for the first time. The table was mine. Months later, the rhythm of Allison's table. My table felt as natural as breathing. The dining room stayed full most nights, regulars greeting us by name, new faces arriving on the strength of word of mouth. One afternoon, my mother stopped by, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she barely sipped. I should have spoken up, she said quietly. I saw what you did for Calder's and let your father's decision stand because I didn't want to fight. I was wrong. Her voice wavered, but she met my eyes. I'm proud of you. Sloane came a few weeks later, dressed simply, none of her old polish. She lingered by the pass, watching service, before admitting, I thought I could handle it. I didn't know how much work it really was. I'm sorry. She didn't ask for forgiveness, only if she could call me now and then for advice. I told her she could. The last to appear was my father. He stood in the doorway one evening after closing, looking smaller somehow. This place is something else, he said. I thought Sloane's degree made her the better choice. I didn't see how much you carried. I was wrong. I didn't gloat. I simply invited him in, poured a glass of wine, and we talked not about business, but about my grandfather and the meals that had started it all. That night, in my kitchen, surrounded by a team I trusted, I plated dishes for a table of regulars, knowing I had rewritten my own legacy.